Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So in today's tutorial, we'll be looking at object-oriented programming. So we're going to be learning object-oriented programming. This course is aimed at absolute beginners, intermediates, and even advanced Python developers who want to just take a brief refresh on object-oriented programming. So we'll be looking at different concepts. Let's just take a look at the course outline that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at classes, how to create a class, how to create an instance or an object. We'll be looking at attributes and method, looking at the different pillars of object-oriented programming, that is inheritance, types of inheritance. We'll be looking at encapsulation, polymorphism, abstraction, special classes or Dunder methods in Python. Special methods or Dunder methods. That is, we'll be looking at properties, data hiding, and all of that. So this course, again, as I said, is aimed at absolute beginners and intermediate Python programmers, and also advanced Python developers who just want to take a quick brush up on object-oriented programming, as syntax always changes, and we always have new stuff coming up all the time. So let's just jump into it. So let's take a look at what is OOP. So OOP is just a short for object-oriented programming. So the short form of object-oriented or the abbreviation of object-oriented programming is just OOP. So what's OOP and why do we need it? Okay. So in programming, the main concept of OOP is being able to represent real-world objects using code, right? For example, let's think of a person, right? A person has different attributes about the person. A person has a name, a person has an age, but the person can also do something, right? A person can dance, a person can walk and do all of that. So how do you represent that using a computer code? So you might think that, okay, we might use the different data structures that we looked at in our introduction to Python programming, like lists, tuples, dictionaries, and other stuff like that. So if you haven't checked out those tutorials on introduction to programming, you can go ahead and check out those tutorials. We covered all these data structures. So those data structures are not adequate enough to represent actual real world objects. So that's why we need object-oriented programming. That's the whole point of object-oriented programming. Okay. So if you don't understand this, just stick along. We'll go into depth, and hopefully you guys get it. Okay, but that's just basic overview of it. Okay. So now in section one, we're going to be looking at classes and objects. So what's a class and what's an object? Good. So a class is just basically a blueprint that we use to create an object, and an object is just an instance of a blueprint. So let's think of it like you want to build a car, right? Or let's say you want to build a house. So before you build a house, right, there are these architects that draw the plan of the house, like the blueprint of where the kitchen will be, where the doors will be, where the windows will be, how big the windows will be, and all that dimensions and other stuff like that. They draw all that before actually building the actual house, right? So that's basically just a blueprint for building the house. So that's basically what a class is. A class is just a blueprint. Now, after you build the house itself is an object, right? An object, but that's an object of the blueprint that it was used to build the house. So that's basically what's an object and what's a class. A class is just a blueprint, and an object is an instance of the blueprint. Okay, good. So once you have looked at that, let's take a look at how we can create a class and an object, and we'll come back to attributes, these components of an entity, which is basically components of an object. So first of all, let's just learn how to create a class and an object. So I'm just going to navigate into my VS Code. Once I'm inside of my VS Code, I've created a file called part1. I'm going to be using this file. So I've created a folder called OOP, part of our introduction to Python series. I have the file in there called part1.py. Okay, so I'm just going to close that side panel. Okay, so once I have that closed, I'm going to go ahead and create a class. So let me just go ahead and say create a class. So how do you create a class? You just use the class keyword in Python and then the name of the class. So we're going to create a class called student, right? So a student class. And this class for now is just going to have nothing. So we're going to be using the pass. Okay. So we talk about the pass or keyword in Python. Let's basically, you can just leave it like this. You have to use pass. Okay. Okay. So we talk about this when we're in our introduction to Python series. Okay. So once we created an object, that's basically, once we created a class, now this is an empty class, right? So let's create an object. So create object. So how do you create an object in Python? Basically, give that object a name. So let's say this is going to be called student underscore one, and it's going to be of type, I'm going to use type hint here. It's going to be of type student. Okay, if you without typing, let me just show you without type hints, because you come across this syntax a lot. So you just say the name of the object and then equals to, and then you call the class. So the class, and then you have opening and closing parentheses. That's how you create an object in Python. So let's go ahead and create another object here. I'm going to call it student. Okay, let me just fix this type of this student, not student. Student underscore two, right? Student two, and student two is going to be a student object. So then just say student. Just it's going to be student. So let me just get that right. So that's how you can create an object. So you have two objects here, student one and student two. So good. Now we can go ahead and actually print out the student one. Let's just print it out and see what we have. So I'm inside of my VS Code, and I'm going to navigate into my OOP folder. And once I'm in there, I'm going to simply do an ls to see what folders we have in there. So sorry, ls, and see, you can see we have Python path_1.py. So I'm going to go ahead and simply run that. Okay. So once I run it, you get this, we get back student at, and then it transfers the memory address of that student. Okay, that's basically it. How you can create an object. So for now, if you print out the object, we just see this memory address of that object. Okay, and we know that it's a student object located at this part of the computer's memory. Now that's not much of a useful information to us. So good, but we'll cover more into depth in this. Don't worry. For now, this is just how you can create an object, and that's what I wanted to show. So you have learned how to create a class, and you have learned how to create an object. And to create an object using the type hints in Python, you have to say student, and student is going to be colon, and then say of type is going to be of type student, and or this say colon and then space and then student, right? Student, which is the name of the class that you're trying to create an instance of. So we create student 2, and it's going to be of type of student, just like that. So that's how you can create an object using type hint. So if I run the code again, it should also just work fine. Good. So that's how you can create an instance of an object in the computer's memory. Basically create a class and an object. So good. So let's go back to the slides and see what we have. Okay, so now we have looked at how to create a class and an object. Now let's move on looking at how to create an entity. Basically, talk about an entity, components of an entity. So an entity is just an object, basically. So if you hear people saying entity or object of a class, they're basically meaning the same thing. Okay, that's why I also use the word entity so that you guys can get familiar with it. So because you come across people using the word entity a lot. Okay, so there are two main components of an entity or an object, right? Let's say a human, right? A human knows something, and a human can do something, right? A phone, like your mobile phone, knows something, and your mobile phone can do something. It can ring, it knows something, has some information. Maybe if you're looking for a contact of a person, the mobile phone knows that contact, right? So it knows something and it does something. So what an object knows are called attributes, and attributes are just basically variable or data fields that are within an entity. They're also called properties. We'll look at them just in a few. Don't worry about them. We'll also look the other component of an entity is a method, right? As I said, a mobile phone can do something. A mobile phone can ring. So basically, these are just functions that define the behavior of an object. Basically, that's what a method is. A method is just a functions that define the behavior of an object. A mobile phone knows something. Attributes. A mobile phone can do something. Methods. Okay. So now let's look at how you can create an attribute for it. So let's first look at the different types of attributes that we have in Python. So there are a couple of attributes that we have. There are two main types of those attributes. There are instance attributes or instance variables, and also class variables or class attributes. So what are instance variables and class variables? That's what we're taking a look at. Now let's jump into the VS Code and let's talk about it. So once you've created this student 1 object and student 2 object, which are both objects of the class student, right? So how can I go ahead and create an instance of this class and a variable for this classes? So we're going to be talking about instance variables. So instance variables. So instance variables are just variables that are known by the object itself specifically. So let's say student 1 can know some information, right? So let's say student 1 has a name, has a first name, has a surname, has an admission number, and also has an email address. So let's say let's give the student some information that the student 1 knows, right? So the same student 1 is an object of the student class. We're going to say dot, and then we say first underscore name, and first name is just going to be, let's say this is going to be John, and let's give it a surname. So maybe student 1, yeah, student 1 dot surname, and the surname is just going to be Doe, right? John Doe. And then finally the student can have an admission number. So we can say student 1 dot admission underscore number, right? An admission number can just be any number. So I'm going to use 1458898, just like this, any random number. And then for the student email address, I'm going to take the first name dot the second name and then at myschool.com. So I'm going to say student 1 dot email. So student 1 dot email is going to be equals to, I'm going to go here and say the first name, which is John, and then dot second name, which is Doe, and then at myschool.com, just like that. So now this student knows something, right? The student 1 object knows something, right? That's what I call attributes, and these attributes are only unique to the student 1 object. That's why they're called instance attributes, right? An attribute belonging to a specific instance. Okay, so once you have that done, I can simply go ahead and let me create another student, and it's going to be called student 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just give some attributes to student 2 as well. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name. So this is going to be Janet, and also here I'm going to change this to be Janet, and then in here I'm going to change this to be 9, just to have a different admission number. So once I have this, I want to go ahead and change these values as well. So I'm going to select this, and then multiple select this, and then simply change this to be 2. So how to multi-select in Python in VS Code is that you just select the object, double click it, and then press Ctrl D and D to select all of them. Okay. So once I have that changed to student 2, now I can go ahead and simply print out, ask student 1 for some information. So I say print, because now student 1 knows some information, I can say student 1 dot first name. So student 1 dot first name, just like that, and first underscore name. So if you just say student 1 dot first name, it's going to print for us John, right? So if I go in the terminal, run this, we get back John. Good. Now if I go student 1 dot student 1 dot surname, is going to return to me the surname of the student. So if I run, we get John Doe. So let's go ahead and repeat the same thing for student 2. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here, and then change student 1 to student 2. So this be 2 and this also be 2. So if I run the code again, now you have John Doe and Janet Doe. Good. So that's how you can an object knows something, right? So now we have a student object which has a name, the first name, the surname, the admission number, and then that email address, basically. So that's basically it. So how you can create and give an instance variable to an object. So these are instance variable because they belong to only one specific instance of that class. Good. So once you have the instance variable created, now we are good to go. So now let's go ahead and talk about class variables. So class variables, these are these variables that are shared within by all instances of a given class. So let's say that we have the class here called student, right? We have the student class right here. So once you have this student class right here, this student class can have an attribute that will be shared by all instances of that student class. So let's say that the school has let's say ranking. So let's say ranking. Let's say school ranking. So let me just call it school underscore ranking. So let's say the school ranks, let's say this is going to be an integer and it's going to be 2. So the school ranks number 2, and you can say number underscore of underscore schools, right? Number of schools, and going to be integer, and it's the number of school is 200. So the school ranks number 2 out of 200 schools, right? So good. So now once we have this class now has some variables, and these are called class variables or class attributes. So these class attributes are shared by all objects of that class. So if I go down here, how do we access these class attributes? So I can simply go ahead and let me just comment this out for now. I can simply go ahead and get access to this class attribute. The first way to get access to a class attribute is by the use of the class name. So I'm going to say student. Let me get this right. So student dot, and then I can say school ranking. So you can see you can get the school ranking. So I want to go ahead and print this out. So I want to go ahead and just simply say print, and let's print out that information. So if I go, you can get the school ranking now is 2, right? So good. I have this right. Just let me just delete this for now. I don't need it. So if I run the code again, we just get 2. Good. So now you can see we have a school, a school class, and that class has an attribute, and that attribute is shared by all instances of that class. So can I use the student 1 object to get access to that variable or the class variable? Yeah, I can do. So if I just go in here and run the code again, now you can see I can even use the object of the class to get access to the class variables, right? So the class variables are shared by all instances of that class. So if I copy this right here and paste it again, and let me paste it again one more time, and let me change this to be the student class itself. So student, and then here this will be student 1 and this will be student 2. So if I change this to be student 2 and run the code again, now you can see all of them are 2, right? So class variables or class attributes are shared by all instances as well as the class itself. Good. So let me go ahead and show you something. So let me just go up here and let me just say student, let's say student 1 dot school ranking equals to, let's say 3. So I've changed the school ranking to be 2 for student 1. So if I change, since all of them share the same values, right? So if I change it for one instance, does it mean it's going to affect all other instances of that class? So let me just go ahead and run the code again. Now you can see it only affected student 1 itself. It didn't affect student 2, neither did it affect the class or the class variable. So the class variable by the class variable itself. So why is that the case? To understand this more, we have to talk about something called namespaces. Okay, so let me just go up here and print out the namespace. So I say print, and I can simply print out the namespace of this class. So I can simply say the objects or the student object. So student object one underscore the dict, just like this, and I can simply run this code. So if I go here and run the code, now you can see it has printed the namespace of that student, the student one object. So this is the namespace of the student one object. This is basically what are the instance variable of that student one object. So you can see the instance variable are name, the surname, the admission number, and then the email. So we don't have the school ranking as part of the namespace of the student. Then why are we printing out the school ranking as 2 whenever we say student 1.2? What it simply does, it looks within its own namespace. If it's not there within its own namespace, then it goes to the namespace of the class. So now that you have assigned, let me just move this code up here before we print the namespace. Now that you have said student1.school ranking equals to 3, and let me run the code again and let's see what we have. So now you can see we have school ranking being added to the namespace of student1, meaning that is an instance variable of student1 and not a class variable anymore. So if you change it for student1, it will only affect student1. And if you're saying student1.school ranking, is going to look within its own namespace first, right? Which it finds it and which it says 3. But if we didn't assign it right here, if I comment out this and I run the code again, you can see now it looks in its own namespace, doesn't find it, and then goes to the namespace of the class itself. So that's how it gets the value from the namespace of the class itself. So good. So whenever we're working with class variables, whenever you try to change the values of class variables, try to do it using the name of the class itself and not an instance of the class. Because if you do it with an instance of the class, it's only going to make that variable an instance variable and only change it for that specific object and not the whole class. Okay, so that's now you guys. I hope now you have a clear understanding of what is an instance variable and what's a class variable. A class variable is just a variable that is shared by all instances of a class and can only be changed by the name by the use of the name of the class itself, while an instance variable is a variable that is only unique to each instance. Okay, so good. So now that you have looked at that, let's go back to the code and let's talk about methods. So like I told you earlier on, right? An object knows something and an object can do something. So you have looked at what an object knows, which are just basically attributes, and you look at the two main attributes, the instance attributes and also class attributes. Now let's take a look at methods which define what an object can do. And I told you a method is just a class, it's just a function that exists within a class. That's basically what a method is. So whenever you have a function within a class, we don't call it a function anymore, we call it a method. And that's what basically a method is, a function within a class. But if it's within a class, we don't call it function, we call it method. Okay, so once we have that, let's talk about the different types of methods that we have. So we have regular methods, we have class methods, we have static methods, we have special methods. Yeah, so those are the main types of methods that we have. Okay, so those are the regular methods, the static methods, the class methods, and then the special methods. Okay, so we'll take a look at all these different types of methods later on, but for now I just want us to look at something called a constructor. Okay, so what basically a constructor is, what's a constructor, and that's really what we'll be looking at in the next tutorial. Okay, so in the next tutorial we'll dive into what a constructor is and how you can use constructors basically. But for now, I just want to go ahead and end here, which will in section 2 we'll look at the different types of methods. So I don't want to talk about methods in this section. We'll do that in section 2, where we'll look at a special type of method known as a constructor. Okay, so that's all for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video so far, make sure that you like the video, you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also one way you can help my YouTube channel is just by simply liking this video or dropping a comment section in the comments below. And also, if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee. The link's gonna be in the description. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.